A Russian fuel train was moving through Crimea with diesel, military equipment, and the supplies needed to keep armored units fighting in southern Ukraine. It may not have looked as dangerous as a tank column, but on the battlefield, fuel can decide whether an armored force keeps moving or becomes a line of silent machines. Ukraine had reportedly watched the train closely and waited until it entered an area where Russian air defense coverage had become weaker. Images released by Ukraine later showed the primary unit striking locomotives, fuel tankers, railway cars, and a Russian Kosta-2 EO-2 low-altitude radar inside Crimea. At almost the same time, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces said they had destroyed a railway bridge near Rozdolny over the North Crimean Canal, then returned to strike the equipment sent to repair it. Taken together, these attacks suggest that Ukraine was not hunting one train. It was targeting the network that moves fuel and military supplies across Crimea toward the southern front. How did Ukraine create a path for the drones? And could these strikes place Russia's entire southern supply system under pressure? Stay with us and subscribe to Military Force as we break down the operation. Ukraine did not attack the moment the train appeared, because the real value of the ambush depended on where the target could be trapped. The convoy was moving away from a logistics area in occupied Crimea, carrying fuel and military equipment toward Russian forces in the south. According to the source account, Ukrainian observers followed its route for many hours. They recorded its speed, watched when it passed key junctions, and studied the pattern of railway traffic around it. The goal was not simply to find a train, it was to understand where that train would become most exposed. That choice would determine whether Russia could protect the convoy, move it away, or send help before the attack developed. Rail transport gives Russia a major advantage because one locomotive can move far more fuel and heavy equipment than a group of trucks. A railway convoy can supply several formations in a single journey, while road transport needs more drivers, more vehicles, and more trips. Yet that efficiency creates a serious weakness. Tracks do not move, and their direction can be studied in advance. A train cannot leave the railway when a drone appears above it, and it cannot turn onto another road to escape. Once the locomotive is disabled or the line ahead is damaged, every car behind it can be held in the same place. That fixed route gave Ukrainian planners time to choose a narrow section where Russian defenses would have fewer chances to react. The source describes an area farther from active air defense positions, with terrain that allowed small drones to remain close to the ground. It also suggests that there were no useful branch lines nearby. On a single track, the crew would have little room to separate the cars, reverse quickly, or move the cargo onto another train. Even rescue work would become difficult because another locomotive and repair teams would have to approach through the same watched corridor. The public evidence should still be treated carefully. In a report released on June 30th, Ukrainian intelligence said the primary unit had struck 2 freight locomotives, 6 fuel tankers, 3 fuel rail cars, and military equipment being carried by rail across Crimea. That statement supports the wider picture of a campaign against Russian logistics, but it does not prove that every listed target belonged to one convoy. The source transcript describes 18 tanker cars, yet that number has not been confirmed by clear public footage or a separate official account. The safer conclusion is that Ukraine hit several important railway assets, while the exact size of the train remains uncertain. What matters most is the method behind the strike. Ukraine appears to have combined local observation, drone surveillance, route analysis, and patience. The operators did not need to search the whole peninsula after launch. They already knew the likely path, the expected timing, and the section where movement would be restricted. This reduced the distance between finding the target and attacking it, which is one of the central advantages of modern drone warfare. Intelligence shaped the battlefield before the first aircraft entered the area. The train therefore became vulnerable long before any explosion. Its schedule created a pattern, the rails limited its choices, and its heavy cargo made rapid escape impossible. Firepower delivered the final damage, but planning created the opportunity. For the drones to reach that opportunity deep inside Crimea, however, Ukraine first had to weaken the Russian systems built to detect low-flying threats. The attack corridor was created because Ukraine first targeted the Russian system built to detect low-flying threats. That system was centered on the Kasta-2E2, a mobile UHF surveillance radar designed to watch the sky. Its job is to find aircraft, missiles, and drones that try to hide behind terrain or move through heavy ground clutter. Figures place its maximum detection range near 150 kilometers, but that number is not guaranteed in combat. Real performance depends on target size, flight height, landscape, weather, and the direction of approach. According to Ukrainian military intelligence, the primary unit destroyed a Kasta-2E2 during its campaign against Russian radar and logistics assets in Crimea. That claim does not prove this radar was the only sensor protecting the railway corridor, and air defense rarely depends on one machine. Russia could still use other radars, observers, electronic sensors, and short-range weapons. Yet removing one low-altitude station can open a temporary gap, especially when nearby systems are covering other directions. Ukraine did not need the whole peninsula to become blind. It only needed one approach to become less visible. The drones described in the source as Hornets then used the ground itself as cover. They flew close to fields and terrain, which reduced the time they could appear above the radar horizon. Ground-based radar has difficulty seeing through hills, trees, buildings, and the curve of the Earth. A small aircraft approaching from a low angle may remain hidden until it is already close. If several drones arrive from different directions, Russian crews must divide their attention and decide which contact presents the greatest danger. That pressure can be as important as speed, because every delayed decision gives the attackers more distance. Russia still had another defensive layer. The source says an electronic warfare system attempted to disrupt satellite navigation and the control link between the operators and the incoming aircraft. That is a common response to long-range drones. Jamming can fill parts of the radio spectrum with noise, while spoofing can feed false position data into a navigation receiver. A drone that depends completely on GPS or a live video connection may lose direction, miss the target, or crash before reaching the final point. The campaign was described differently. After the connection was disturbed, the drones were said to continue their final approach through optical guidance or computer vision. In simple terms, an onboard camera and processor could follow a selected image instead of waiting for constant steering commands. Ukraine's defense ministry has confirmed that last-mile guidance, automatic target tracking, and navigation without GPS are already being used in several Ukrainian systems. However, the exact abilities of the Hornet, named in this source, have not been independently published. It would therefore be unsafe to claim that a Zhitel jammer cut Starlink and that every aircraft then became fully autonomous. What can be said with greater confidence is that the battle followed a layered pattern. The radar tried to find the threat. The drones used terrain to remain hidden. Electronic warfare tried to break their connection. A backup guidance method was meant to carry them through the final seconds. Each side answered the technology used by the other, and the result depended on which layer failed first. When the radar gap and the jamming effort could not stop the approach, the train became a long, visible target carrying the material that could turn one successful hit into a much larger fire. Ukraine first struck the parts of the train most likely to spread damage, then widened the operation toward the railway itself. The drones came down on fuel cars and locomotives because those targets could stop the convoy and create a larger fire. According to the source account, the warheads were designed to pierce metal before exploding. Against a tanker car, the attack did not need to tear the whole vehicle apart. It only had to break the steel wall, release fuel, and create enough heat for the damage to grow. Diesel does not always explode like a bomb, and that detail matters. Once the tank was opened, fuel could spill across the car, reach hot metal, and catch fire. The flames could then damage nearby wagons, brake lines, couplings, cables, and sections of track. Even when another tanker did not burn completely, it could still become unsafe to move. If the locomotive was disabled, the rest of the convoy could remain trapped behind it, even if several cars were intact. The fire also created new problems for the attacking drones. Thick smoke could hide the outline of the train, while rising heat could confuse infrared cameras and make later strikes less accurate. This meant the first successful hits changed the battlefield for both sides. Russian crews had to deal with flames, damaged equipment, and a blocked line. Ukrainian operators had to keep tracking separate targets through smoke and heat. The attack was no longer a simple line of drones diving on a clear object. It had become a fast fight inside a burning rail corridor. Ukraine later said the primary unit destroyed 2 freight locomotives, 6 fuel tankers, 3 fuel rail cars, and military equipment transported by rail in Crimea. Those figures support the claim that the strike caused serious damage, but they do not prove that the entire convoy was destroyed. Public footage has not clearly shown every car, and the source description of 18 tankers remains unconfirmed. The safer judgment is that several transport assets were lost, while the size of the train is still uncertain. Ukraine then moved from the cargo to the route that future shipments would need. Near Rozdolny, a railway bridge crossed the North Crimean Canal and formed part of a line used to move supplies across the peninsula. Ukrainian Special Operations Forces said drones damaged the rails and brought down one span during the night before June 22nd. When repair equipment arrived, resistance sources reportedly passed on its location. Another strike followed during the night before June 23rd, hitting the machinery and the remaining structure. A heavy attack drone, believed to be from the FP2 drone family, was reportedly used for this mission. One known configuration carries a warhead of about 105 kilograms, far more than the smaller drones used against the train. That explosive force can damage concrete, twist rails, and make a bridge unsafe even if the whole structure does not collapse. The purpose is not always to drop the bridge into the canal. It can be enough to break one critical section and stop rail traffic until engineers complete repairs. The logic was clear. Hitting the train destroyed cargo already on the move. Striking the bridge delayed shipments that had not yet started. Attacking repair equipment increased the danger for every team sent to restore the line. The damage, therefore, began to spread beyond burned wagons and broken concrete, and toward Russia's ability to support forces fighting on the southern front. Losing locomotives, fuel cars, and a key railway bridge would not completely cut Crimea off, but it could make every shipment slower, smaller, and more dangerous. Railways matter because they move heavy supplies with far greater efficiency than road convoys. One train can carry fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and military vehicles that would require dozens of trucks. For an army that depends heavily on artillery and armored forces, that difference is critical. Once railway movement is disrupted, the burden quickly shifts to a weaker transport system. Russia's southern forces need a steady flow of fuel because tanks and infantry fighting vehicles consume large amounts during movement. A unit may still have working vehicles and enough ammunition, yet its ability to attack can fall if diesel arrives late. Commanders may have to reduce patrols, delay the movement of reserves, or keep recovery vehicles closer to their bases. These choices do not stop an army at once, but they narrow what it can safely do. That is how a transport problem begins to affect battlefield decisions. This can weaken operational tempo before stocks are fully exhausted because commanders begin saving fuel for emergencies instead of using it for routine movement, training, or rapid counterattacks. That restraint can reshape combat plans. Railways are also difficult to replace because their main parts are specialized. A damaged locomotive cannot be replaced by a civilian truck, and a fuel rail car cannot simply be substituted with an ordinary cargo vehicle. Bridges, stations, and junctions create fixed points that every train must pass. Ukrainian Special Operations Forces described the bridge near Rozdolny as part of a corridor linking Russian territory, Crimea, and forces operating in the southern direction. If one point becomes unsafe, traffic must slow, stop, or move through another route. Russia still has options, and this is why the situation should not be described as a total blockade. Engineers can repair damaged sections. Cargo can be unloaded and moved around a broken point. Supplies can travel through the Kerch area, the Chonhar corridor, ports, highways, or storage sites already inside Crimea. Yet every alternative creates another cost. Repair teams need protection. Trucks need drivers and fuel. Ships require loading facilities. New routes take longer, and they may also be watched by Ukrainian drones. The largest pressure comes from breaking large shipments into smaller ones. A railway convoy can move a great amount of fuel in one protected journey, but trucks must make many separate trips. That means more vehicles on the road, more movement patterns to track, and more chances for reconnaissance drones to find a target. It also increases maintenance needs and traffic at loading points. Even when most trucks arrive safely, the system becomes less efficient and harder to manage. The supply line continues to work, but it works under greater risk. Ukraine, therefore, does not need to create a perfect blockade to achieve a military effect. It only needs to make Russian logistics less stable and more expensive. Moscow may be forced to move air defense systems away from other missions, guard repair crews, protect fuel depots, and spread cargo across several routes. Every soldier and weapon assigned to the rear is one less resource available near the front. The pressure is not measured only by what is destroyed, but also by what Russia must now protect. When rail transport becomes dangerous or temporarily unavailable, the remaining burden moves onto the roads, where smaller fuel vehicles are easier to detect, track, and ambush. Russia's answer was to move more fuel by road, but that adjustment created many smaller targets along routes watched by Ukrainian drones. The R-280 highway links Russian-held areas in southern Ukraine with Crimea, and it has become more important whenever rail traffic is delayed. Trucks can avoid a damaged bridge and use different roads, yet they carry far less than a train. Replacing one large shipment may require dozens of journeys, which places more vehicles in the open and gives surveillance teams more chances. The railway problem did not disappear. It was transferred onto the asphalt. Some Russian soldiers and military bloggers have described parts of the R-280 as a highway of death because vehicles can be watched and attacked for hours. Ukrainian units have also claimed that cargo traffic on the route fell by 71% during a 2-week period, although that figure has not been independently confirmed. The road remains usable, but every driver must consider drones, mines, damaged pavement, and the risk of stopping beside another burning vehicle. A transport corridor can still exist on a map while becoming unreliable in practice. According to documents and accounts cited in the source, Russian forces tried to make fuel movements harder to recognize. Military tankers were reportedly repainted or changed to look like civilian cargo trucks. Some vehicles were fitted with false structures that made them resemble milk carriers, while larger loads were divided among smaller trucks. A hidden tanker may survive longer, but spreading fuel across many vehicles also requires more drivers, escorts, maintenance, and time. The pressure was no longer limited to military units. Fuel lines in Crimea, purchase limits of 20 liters per person, and QR codes linked to vehicle number plates. The same report described temporary shortages of sugar and limits on buckwheat purchases, although shelves were later restocked and there was no sign of panic. These conditions showed how attacks on military transport could reach civilian life without cutting the peninsula off completely. When the armed forces receive priority, ordinary drivers and businesses are often the first to face restrictions. Russian-installed authorities suspended gasoline sales to civilians and reserved available supplies for government and essential services. Ukraine has openly described its wider drone campaign as an effort to isolate Crimea and weaken the routes that support Russian forces. Two main corridors have come under pressure: the connection through the Kerch Strait and the land route across occupied southeastern Ukraine. If both become less dependable at the same time, Moscow must rely on stored fuel, sea transport, and guarded road convoys. The source estimates that about 16 drones used in the operation cost roughly $80,000 in total. That number cannot be treated as a final audit, and the damage remains uncertain. Yet the comparison still explains the logic of asymmetric warfare. The targets included a radar, locomotives, fuel cars, repair equipment, a railway bridge, and the cargo being moved. Their replacement value and the cost of interrupted transport could be far greater than the price of the attacking aircraft, even before security costs are added. The deeper burden comes after the explosions. Russia must deploy more radar and air defense, guard engineers, change train schedules, divide shipments, use additional trucks, and accept longer travel times. It may also have to limit civilian fuel, so military formations receive priority. Ukraine does not need every drone to hit or every road to close. It only needs to force Moscow to spend more resources protecting the rear while reducing the speed and certainty of supply. That is when an ambush against one train begins to grow into a problem for the entire defense and logistics system supporting Crimea. This operation shows that a supply line does not need to be completely destroyed before it begins to lose military value. Russia can replace damaged trains, repair bridges, and move fuel by road or sea. However, every alternative demands more time, more vehicles, and stronger protection. Engineers must work under the threat of another strike. Truck convoys must travel farther and appear more often on roads watched by drones. Air defense units may also be pulled away from other areas to guard transport routes and repair teams. Ukraine appears to be building pressure through a chain of connected attacks. Radar systems are targeted to reduce warning time. Locomotives and fuel cars are struck to remove cargo already moving toward the front. Bridges are damaged to delay future deliveries. Repair equipment can then become another target, which makes recovery slower and more dangerous. This is where asymmetric warfare becomes powerful. Ukraine does not need more tanks, aircraft, or heavy weapons than Russia. It needs to identify weak points where a small and relatively cheap weapon can force Moscow to spend far more money defending the system around it. The effect is not measured only by what burns. It is also seen in delayed trains, longer transport routes, guarded repair sites, fuel limits, and commanders who can no longer trust that supplies will arrive on time. Even when the logistics network continues to work, uncertainty can reduce its value. Still, the situation should not be exaggerated. Crimea has not been fully isolated, and Russian forces in the south are not proven to be close to running out of fuel. Moscow still has storage facilities, alternative roads, sea transport, and a large repair capacity. What has changed is the safety of the rear area. A bridge, a tanker, or a locomotive inside Crimea can no longer be treated as a protected asset far from the front. Each one may become part of a wider campaign designed to slow Russian operations without a major ground breakthrough. The main question is no longer whether Russia can repair one damaged route. It is whether Moscow can keep every route open while Ukraine continues finding new ways to strike them. Subscribe to Military Force for more clear analysis of weapons, battlefield operations, and the political decisions shaping modern wars.